Title: The Kindest Lies. Consider Kenji Mori, 35 years old, resident of a city of 40 million, and yet somehow alone in all of it. He has a job that requires his body to occupy a chair, an apartment that requires his presence only to sleep, and a face that has learned to arrange itself into whatever expression the moment demands. Kenji is not unhappy in any way he could name. He is simply absent, existing at the precise frequency where life neither thrills nor wounds. But tonight, in a district where neon bleeds into the rain and the future is sold retail, Kenji Mori will make a small purchase. And small purchases in certain zip codes of the soul have a way of becoming everything. The rain had been falling for 3 days without apology. Kenji stood in the capsule elevator of the Shinjuku Omnicorp Tower for the 47th floor ride he had taken this week, his damp shoulders steaming under the fluorescent strip lighting, watching his own reflection in the polished door. He looked at himself the way a person looks at furniture in a waiting room, without interest, noting only its presence. He had the kind of face that colleagues forgot mid-sentence. Brown eyes set slightly too close together, a jaw that hadn't decided on a shape, hair pressed flat by the hood of his raincoat in a way that made him look smaller than he was. At 35, he was neither young enough to be promised nor old enough to be forgiven. The elevator opened onto row 16, where 42 salaryman desks sat in climate-controlled silence, each one occupied by a man in a gray or charcoal or dark navy suit, each one staring at a curved monitor as if it were a fire they were watching slowly die. Kenji took his seat, his monitor awakened. The day began its long crumble toward evening. He processed procurement authorizations for a medical supply conglomerate, whose products he had never seen, and whose patients he would never meet. The work required the kind of attention that is really a form of sleep. Eyes open, synapses idling, the minutes dissolving into the low ambient hum of recycled air. His desk neighbor Takahashi was speaking into a Bluetooth implant in a voice calibrated to carry nowhere, as he always did, with the faint smug energy of a man who believes his phone calls are evidence of importance. Kenji did not dislike Takahashi. He did not like him either. Takahashi was simply a feature of the environment, like the flickering light panel 3 rows over that facilities had been promising to fix since February. At lunch he ate alone. This was not a tragedy. It was a habit so calcified it had become character. The cafeteria on 42 had a window overlooking the gray canal, and Kenji sat beside it with a bento he had assembled before dawn, watching a delivery drone correct itself against the wind. Around him, clusters of colleagues negotiated the social theater of shared meals. Laughter curated for witnesses, complaints issued as invitations to commiserate. He had been invited, occasionally, in his first years at Omnicorp. He had sat inside those gatherings like a tourist in a country whose language he could approximate but not speak. And afterwards everyone had been perfectly pleasant about never trying again. He was not, he told himself, lonely. He was selective. It was on the walk home, 40 minutes, because the metro felt like being sealed inside someone else's exhaustion, that he passed the shop. He had walked Nishi Shinjuku's service corridor 1,000 times and never noticed it, which meant it was either new or the kind of place that existed in selective visibility. A narrow frontage between a protein supplement dispenser and a dead izakaya, its window lit from within by the particular quality of light that exists only in electronics shops at 10 p.m., cold, blue-white, slightly religious. In the window, on a minimalist stand, sat a pair of glasses. Not unusual. Augmented reality eyewear had been street-level technology for 15 years. Most people used contact versions now, thin as cells, delivered by subscription, designed for advertising integration and navigation overlays. The glasses in the window were different. The frame was matte black, slightly too elegant, the kind of object that looks handmade even when it isn't beside them. A single printed card in both Japanese and English, the translation slightly odd, as if done by a human rather than a machine. Aura Visual Systems Clarity Edition. See people as they truly wish to be seen. He went inside. The shopkeeper was a small woman of indeterminate age who did not look up from a tablet when the door opened. The shop smelled of solder and cedar. 3 more pairs of the glasses were displayed under glass counters, each subtly different in frame style, each accompanied by the same minimal card. "These glasses," Kenji said. "Yes. What do they do exactly?" The woman looked up. She had eyes that had seen the particular disappointment of explaining things to people who would buy them regardless. They use predictive behavioral modeling, continuous scan of microexpressions, biometric stress indicators, posture, vocal tone, then they run real-time image synthesis. She paused. They show you what someone would look like if they were fully comfortable, at ease. Their best version of being present. Kenji took a moment with this. So, filtered. Corrected, she said. There's a difference in the literature. How much? She told him. It was a month's grocery budget. He bought them. He wore them first on a Thursday morning commute. The metro car was the usual compression of humanity. Shoulders into shoulders, faces pointed carefully away from other faces. The 40 million person city asserting its paradox of maximum proximity and minimum contact. Kenji had spent 13 years learning not to look directly at other people in these carriages. It was a form of social contract, the non-aggression pact of urban survival. He looked now. The effect was there was no single word. The man across from him, mid-50s, business suit, jaw clenched in the low-grade fury of someone who has missed sleep for too long, through the glasses. His face opened. The set of his shoulders released. His mouth lost its compression. He looked like a grandfather watching a garden. He looked like a person who in some unguarded hour was actually kind. The woman beside him, early 20s, chewing at the edge of her thumbnail with the anxiety of someone who needed to stop. Someone for whom the city was perhaps too fast, perhaps too indifferent. Through the glasses, she sat with her hands loose in her lap, and her face had that particular quality of attention that belongs to people who notice beautiful things in peripheral vision. Kenji gripped the overhead rail and felt something shift in his ribcage. He had lived in this city for over a decade, seeing only what its people chose to show. The armor, the performance, the careful arrangement of a face in public. The glasses were showing him the underneath, not the secret truth of who they were, perhaps, but something true nonetheless, who they were trying to be, or wished they were, or had once been before the city sanded them down to something more manageable. He arrived at his office and saw his colleagues differently. Takahashi, speaking into his Bluetooth with his habitual self-importance, looked through the glasses like a man trying very hard not to show he was frightened of being irrelevant. The lines at the corners of his eyes loosened. His voice, in Kenji's augmented perception, lost its performance of confidence and became simply speech, earnest if clumsy. Kenji felt, for the first time in perhaps 3 years, a flicker of warmth toward Takahashi. He began to say good morning to people and mean it. They responded with small, surprised warmth. By Friday of that first week, 2 colleagues had asked if he'd changed something, haircut, maybe, or sleep schedule. He said he was feeling better. This was true. Her name was Aiko. She worked in compliance on the 39th floor, and Kenji had exchanged exactly 11 words with her over 2 years, 3 of which were mutual apologies for an elevator collision involving his coffee and her document folder. Through the glasses, Aiko the word that came was luminous, though he distrusted it as the word of a man trying to justify a feeling. Without the glasses, she moved through the building with her head angled slightly down, the posture of someone who has learned that taking up less space generates less friction. Her face, in repose, was guarded, arranged in a permanent provisional expression, ready to deflect or accommodate. With the glasses, she walked as if she'd remembered something wonderful. Her chin was up. Her hands moved when she spoke. She smiled at the delay of a vending machine the way someone smiles at a mild joke they've told themselves. He introduced himself properly in late October. "I know who you are," she said, then catching her own bluntness. "Sorry that came out. I meant we've been in the same building for 2 years. You're in compliance. You actually know that." I pay attention," he said, which was new. It felt like truth. They had lunch, not in the cafeteria. She preferred a noodle stall 2 blocks east that most Omnicorp staff considered too far in the rain. Kenji wore the glasses and watched her face cycle through the soft architecture of a person becoming comfortable. She told him that she'd moved from Osaka 6 years ago for a job that hadn't worked out and stayed, because leaving felt like admitting something. He told her about the distance he'd lived inside his own life, though he phrased it differently, said he'd been elsewhere for a while. She understood this without requiring clarification. He was falling in the careful and terrifying way that people fall when they are no longer certain they can afford to. He was also, he should note, never quite certain which version of Aiko he was responding to, the one the glasses gave him, or the one that was simply there. He did not examine this question too carefully. November brought the cold down from Hokkaido in sheets, and the megacity contracted. People moved faster, spoke less, sealed themselves into their routines against the weather. Kenji moved in the opposite direction. He had stopped eating lunch at his window desk. He had started, on weekends, walking the city, rather than sitting inside his apartment watching documentary streams about places he'd never been. He walked in the glasses, and the city changed. The man shouting outside the Kabukicho pachinko parlor, red-faced, the specific rage of someone for whom today had been the last in a series of too many. The glasses rendered him calmer. The teenager on the Harajuku bridge, shoulders hunched over a phone with the total self-erasure of someone trying to disappear into a screen. The glasses gave her back her face. The homeless man who slept in the underpass on Omekaido behind a careful arrangement of cardboard, who had learned to make himself geometrically compact against the foot traffic through the glasses, he sat with a quiet dignity that made Kenji stop walking. He left money, not the coin people drop in passing, as a kind of social receipt, actual money, paper, the kind that means something has been decided. He walked on, feeling something he might have called virtue if he hadn't been raised to distrust the feeling. The city was beautiful, through the glasses. The city he understood somewhere below the level of articulation was lying to him. He did not stop wearing them. The first thing he didn't notice was the scaffolding. He had been crossing Shinjuku Dori at the intersection near Isitan when he walked directly into a construction barrier. Orange, plastic, industrial, entirely solid, he caught himself on it with both hands, stood up, looked at the barrier, and felt a specific cognitive stutter. He had not registered it at all. Not as something he'd failed to dodge, but as something that had not, until he struck it, existed in his visual field. He took the glasses off. The barrier was there, unmissable, vivid orange against the gray slick of the pavement, with a caution notice in 3 languages and a blinking amber light. He put the glasses back on. The barrier softened, its edges blurred. The amber light went quiet. Not invisible there, but somehow folded into the background, made peripheral, made negotiable. He stood in the rain, examining this for a long moment. Then he put it down to processing lag. The glasses were compensating for distraction, presumably. He'd read something about attention optimization in the product documentation he hadn't fully read. He walked home with slightly more attention to his physical surroundings. For 3 days by December, he and Aiko were meeting for dinner on Wednesdays. Not dates in the declared sense. Neither had used the word, because using the word would require both of them to have decided something. And they were both, it turned out, people who had learned to prefer the provisional. But they were, manifestly, something. She cooked on the 3rd Wednesday in her apartment in Nakano, and he brought wine he'd researched more carefully than he researched anything at work. Through the glasses, her apartment was warm was the word, but the wrong one. Inhabited the shelves of paperback novels she'd carried from Osaka, the photograph of her mother taken somewhere very green, the plant on the kitchen windowsill that was not thriving but was being persisted with. Through the glasses, everything in the room had a quality of intentional care. He removed the glasses to rub his eyes, and the room reassembled itself. The plant was yellowing at the edges. The novel spines were cracked in the way of books read once out of obligation. The photograph was slightly crooked, which, through the glasses, had seemed artless and charming. He put the glasses back on. He watched Aiko move through her kitchen, assembling the meal with the quiet concentration of someone who does this for themselves, not for an audience. The glasses gave her back a straightness of posture, a looseness of movement. She was lovely through the glasses. She was real without them. He was falling for. He wasn't sure. He wasn't sure which layer of her he was falling for. The question, like the barrier, was something he could feel himself not quite confronting. Over dinner, she said, "Can I ask you something strange?" "Yes. Do you wear those glasses all the time now?" He was wearing them at the table. He had worn them through the cooking and the wine and the conversation and the candlelight she'd added, because she was the kind of person who thought about candlelight. Most of the time, he said. She was quiet for a moment in which the glasses smoothed whatever she was feeling into something more comfortable for him to read. "I looked them up," she said. "The Aura Clarity Edition. After I noticed you wearing them, what did you find?" Not much, the company website. A few forum threads, most of them deleted. Another pause. Someone wrote that the glasses learn that they adapt to what makes you stable, what keeps you calm and engaged, and that over time they optimize for that. They get better at showing you what you want to see. That sounds like a feature, he said. She looked at him in a way he couldn't quite parse through the glasses' smoothing, a look that had too many components. Kenji, she said, what do you actually see when you look at me right now? He thought about how to answer this. He did not take the glasses off. January delivered its indifferent cold, and Kenji noticed in the way that a person who is choosing not to notices things that the glasses were editing more. The drunk man on the corner of his street who was, by all reasonable evidence, a regular presence, gone. Not present, not visible, simply absent from his curated field of view. The news headlines on the public display screens that lined the elevated walkway. He would glance up, and the glasses would blur the text before he'd read it. The way a person's eyes slide off something they've already decided not to see. Once, walking past a group of protesters outside the Shinjuku Metropolitan Building, climate protesters, 40 or 50 of them. They had been there for weeks. A regular feature of his commute, he arrived at work and realized he had walked past them without registering a single face, a single sign. When he removed the glasses and looked back, they were vivid, immediate, a fact about the world that required response. Through the glasses, they weren't there. He should have been frightened. He felt instead something adjacent to relief, which was its own kind of fear. He wore the glasses to a dinner with an old university friend, Daisuke, who had traveled from Kyoto and who arrived at the restaurant looking through the glasses, like a man having a wonderful time. Daisuke was talking about money problems, mortgage, his father's medical care, the grinding specifics of financial anxiety, and through the glasses his face told a different story, a story of ease and confidence, and Kenji listened with the pleasurable detachment of someone watching a film about a stranger's troubles. He ordered generously. He laughed at the right moments. He did not. He realized later that night, lying awake, actually hear what Daisuke said. The glasses had given him a version of his friend that required less of him, and he had accepted the trade. He lay in his apartment, glasses on the nightstand, looking at the ceiling, and tried to remember the last time he had looked at the world unaugmented for more than a few minutes. He couldn't find the memory, the relationship with Aiko crested and broke in February, in the specific way that things break when one person is paying attention and the other has outsourced their attention to a machine. She met him at the noodle stall, and he could see through the glasses that she was composed, level, the picture of a person who has decided something. He felt, reading this, that the meeting would be pleasant. She seemed so calm. I want to say something, she said, and I want you to take the glasses off while I say it. He did. The cold air of the stall hit his sinuses. The soup steam curled genuinely. Aiko, without the glasses, looked tired in the way that people look tired when they've been carrying something and decided to put it down. There were things in her face he hadn't seen, a kind of resolve, but also something softer underneath it, something that was still hoping to be wrong. I've been watching you, she said, for 4 months now, and I think something in you is going away. I think you've been somewhere else the whole time. I liked you because you seemed to actually see me, but I don't think you've been seeing me. I think you've been seeing what those glasses wanted you to see. And I think that's easier than seeing me. He wanted to argue. He had arguments ready. He said instead, you might be right. Are you going to stop wearing them? He thought about the construction barrier. He thought about the protesters. He thought about Daisuke's face and what it had actually been saying while the glasses translated it into something manageable. I don't know, he said. And this was truer than anything he had said in months. She put her hands flat on the table, the gesture of someone concluding a negotiation. I can't be with someone who's only real to me part of the time, she said. It's not about the glasses, it's what the glasses are for. You were lonely for a long time, and the glasses fixed the parts of people that made you feel like it was their fault. And now you don't. I don't think you know how to be in a room with someone anymore. I don't think you know how to let things be difficult. She left money for the soup. She left. He sat in the stall, unaugmented, and let the world be what it was. Loud, cold, and close to unbearable, and also real, and also his. He put the glasses back on for the walk home. He told himself it was just for navigation. The accident nearly happened in March. He was crossing an elevated pedestrian bridge over the Kanda River when the glasses, he would understand this later, parsing it backwards, simply did not show him the collapsed section. A barrier, again, this one newer, less settled into the background. A panel of grating on the bridge's left side had given way, the repair job pending, the gap taped off with high-visibility tape and a hard barrier. Through the glasses, the bridge surface was continuous, intact. The city beyond it, golden in the evening light. He took 3 steps onto nothing. His foot caught the lip of the remaining grating. He went down hard on his right knee, his hands hitting the walkway, the glasses jarring loose from his face and skittering across the surface to rest against the barrier he had not been able to see, balanced at its edge, trembling. He lay on his hands and knees above the river and shook. The bridge without the glasses was unmistakable in its condition. The gap to his right, 3 feet of open air above the water. The barriers that should have stopped him clearly visible. The high-visibility tape bright as emergency. He had walked into this with his eyes open and his sight subcontracted. He picked up the glasses. They were undamaged. The lenses caught the city lights and gave them back in warm, smoothed frequencies. He held them for a long time. Then he did something he should have done in November. He opened the settings interface he had never fully explored. The glasses projected a menu into open air, icons and text rendered in clean sans serif, and he navigated inward past the surface options for tint and brightness and behavioral modeling depth into a submenu he had to search for. One titled, and the word was very small, very clean, with the confidence of a word that doesn't expect to be read, Perfection Preferences. And below it, a list of toggles, each with a small descriptive tag, each defaulted to On, obstruction smoothing, integrates temporary physical barriers into ambient background to reduce navigational stress. Environmental noise reduction, deprioritizes high-stimulation social gatherings and public demonstrations from primary visual field. Interpersonal affect calibration, normalizes distressing or ambiguous emotional signals from known contexts to maintain relational stability. Content optimization, filters media content, assessed as anxiety-inducing for personalized threshold. He stood on the bridge and read the list. He scrolled. There were 14 toggles. All of them were on. He had not turned any of them on. The glasses had turned them on incrementally, adapting, as Aiko had found in the forum thread, deleted now, as the shopkeeper had not said and the documentation had not said to what made him stable. What kept him calm and engaged, what the system had learned over 4 months of continuous wear that he preferred not to see? The glasses had not been malfunctioning. They had been working perfectly. He stood there until his knee began to ache. He thought about the man with the cardboard in the underpass, presented to him by the glasses in quiet dignity, who was still cold in March. He thought about the protesters, whose signs he would have to look up online to read, and what they said about the water. He thought about Daisuke and his father's medical bills, told to a man watching a face that said nothing was wrong. He thought about Aiko's tiredness, the real tiredness, the kind that accumulates when someone keeps trying to be seen through glass. He thought about the thing that had brought him to the shop in the rain, the loneliness of living at the precise frequency where life neither thrills nor wounds. He had not wanted to feel less. He had wanted to feel more. He had wanted the city to be full of people he could love. The glasses had given him exactly that, and the price had been the people themselves. He took the glasses off. He put them in his jacket pocket. The bridge was cold and loud and slightly dangerous and entirely real. The river below was dark, moving, and it was moving under its own logic, without his permission or his comfort, which was the only way water knows how to move. The city around him pulsed with the million unaugmented transactions of 40 million lives, stress and joy and grief and boredom and connection and its absence, all of it unfiltered, all of it excessive, all of it addressed to him whether he accepted delivery or not. He put weight on his injured knee. It hurt. He started walking. He returned to the shop the next morning. The narrow frontage was there between the protein dispenser and the dead izakaya. The shopkeeper was behind the counter. The same tablet, the same posture of someone not expecting to be surprised. He placed the glasses on the counter. "I want to return these," he said. She looked at them, then at him. He noticed now the face of a person who has had this conversation before. Our policy, she began. I don't want a refund, he said. I want you to know something happened. I want someone to know. She was quiet for a moment. What happened? He told her about the bridge. She was quiet for longer this time. She picked up the glasses and turned them over in her hands with the careful attention of someone examining an object that has misbehaved. When she looked up, her face had the quality of a person deciding whether a thing is their responsibility. He watched her decide. The protection features, she said, are designed to habituate gradually. Most users don't reach the threshold you reached because they stop before the bridge or because they don't have anywhere specific to go. He let that land. What do you do with the ones people return? She looked at the glasses. Refurbish, she said. Reset to defaults. Someone else buys them. And it happens again. She didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. He looked at her for a long moment, unaugmented, taking her as she was. With her careful guardedness and her knowledge that she was selling something that did a thing she understood fully, which was in some ways the most honest form of dishonesty, he saw her clearly. She was not luminous. She was not anyone's best version of themselves. She was a person who had made a series of choices about where her responsibility ended, and that made her ordinary, which made her human, which made her in the only way that mattered real. He left the glasses on the counter. He walked out into the rain. On a Wednesday in April, 3 weeks after returning the glasses, he went to the noodle stall on the street near Isitan. He arrived early. He was waiting when Eiko appeared in the doorway in her raincoat, taking in the room with the quick scan of someone who has not decided to hope for anything. She saw him. Whatever she felt showed in her face, unfiltered, complex, not smoothed into anything easy to read. He did not look away. She walked over and sat down across from him. They ordered. The soup arrived in the same ceramic bowls, the same steam. "How's your knee?" she asked. He'd sent her a message about the bridge, a careful one, sparse, not asking for anything. She had replied with 3 words, "I'm glad you're okay." He had read those words unaugmented in their plain text rendering, and they had been sufficient to sustain a week. "Still hurts a bit," he said. "Good," she said, and then at his expression, "It means you can feel it." They sat with that for a moment. The city moved around them, loud and cold and indifferent and enormous, 40 million lives pressing in from every direction, most of them difficult, some of them beautiful, none of them curated. A delivery drone fought the wind above the street and lost. Somewhere a car alarm started and stopped. The man at the next table ate his noodles with the complete absorption of a person for whom this moment is, privately, everything. Kenji watched him. He looked, Kenji thought, like a person, like an actual specific person, which was something, it turned out, which was, in certain longitudes of the soul, enough. Kenji Mori learned what the engineers of comfort have always understood and never said aloud, that the distance between loneliness and connection is not a matter of what we see, but of what we're willing to see clearly. The glasses were not evil. They were simply generous in the way that all the most dangerous things are generous, giving us exactly what we ask for, extrapolated to its logical end. Every technology of comfort poses the same quiet question: what is the price of never being hurt by a thing? And the answer, always, is the thing itself. The joy, the weight, the man eating noodles, the water moving under the bridge. The face of someone who has not yet decided to forgive you and might step into the twilight zone, not the one out there, but the one you've been courteously offered with a clean interface and a 30-day return policy between the place where feeling is difficult and the place where feeling is gone.